Okay, welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm going to do a little intro. I'm going to talk about a little instructions for folks that are listening. I'm going to introduce our guests, and then we'll get into things. So today's LinkedIn Live session, Unlocking Peak Performance, the Science of Mindset and Health. Exciting topic. Actually, our little kind of prep discussion here. We've covered a lot of things. I'm hoping we can get a couple of those into the session today. But let me introduce our guests. First up, we've got Gina Melicon-Long. She is founder and master trainer at Greatness U. She's a keynote speaker, breakthrough coach. She's also a best-selling author. And she specializes in high-performance coaching, neuro-linguistic programming, and transformational change, helping leaders and entrepreneurs achieve peak results with less effort. Gina and I have been longtime friends through EO and a couple other organizations. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Gina, thank you for being here.
So excited.
Yeah. And next up, we have Dr. Tim Cook. Dr. Cook is the founder of VivaGen Life Sciences. He specializes in health optimization and longevity medicine with decades of experience in internal medicine and integrative health. He brings cutting-edge insights into personalized healthcare, peptide therapy, and preventive strategies for sustained peak performance. Dr. Cook, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into our conversation, for those listening on here, we are going to be watching the comments. And so if you have a question or you want to drop something there, we'll try to weave it into the conversation and the questions. If you happen to be, that's going to be on LinkedIn. If you happen to be on YouTube, I'm not going to be watching those. If you can jump over to LinkedIn, leave your comments there. We'll make sure to watch that and integrate it into the conversation. If you're watching the replay, go ahead and put questions into the comments on LinkedIn. We'll watch that page and try to answer comments in the coming days and weeks. So even if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave comments on there and we'll catch it. So with all that, let's get into the conversation. I just want to start with a kind of a grounding question for each of you, which is just, how do you define peak performance, or what does peak performance mean to you? And you know, what does it look like? Dr. Cook, why don't we start with you and then we can go to Gina.
Sure. Bruce, I think peak performance is having the energy and the well-being to lead an unlimited life. And from my perspective, the intersection of longevity medicine, biohacking, consciousness, fulfillment, those are the three pillars that must intersect to provide that peak performance.
Yeah, that's good. Gina, how about you?
Well, greatness is my thing. And I just, my general fundamental philosophy is that it lies within everyone. It's not something you need to get. It's something that's there, but you have to access it. And if you don't access it, then it just lies dormant. And so peak performance literally means performing at your peak today, right? And Tim was asking about this drawing behind me that looks a bit like a graph. It's just the process of change. And every time you reach a new peak, what you'll notice if you've ever been hiking is if you're standing there, there's always another peak in the distance that's higher. And so peak performance just means to be at the best point where you are. And the Greek word for that, the ancient Greek word for that was called acme. So that means your highest point at this point.
Yeah. I've always kind of looked at this as being, kind of the state or a point in time or a moment in time where your ability to, I'll call it, generate value, and we can talk about productivity or whatever kind of term we want, but somehow generate something of importance for you with seemingly minimal effort or challenge. There's this kind of state which is you get into which you can produce exceptionally higher outputs or more value without having the feeling, because I've been in lots of states where I'm grinding.
Yes.
I can produce a lot of value grinding, but there's something about the ease that I think is really interesting when we talk about peak performance. And so that's what I'm kind of always looking at, and how do we, personally, or working with clients, working with, entrepreneurs, CEOs and things like that, on how do we create more of that, a higher percentage of that in our routines and in our kind of schedules, such that we can do that. I guess in terms of how we kind of notice, or how do you evaluate if someone is in peak performance? Like, what are their indicators, or how do you kind of measure, or what are the signals that you look for in terms of defining, okay, yes, I'm in a peak performance state. Gina, why don't we start with you on this one?
Well, I think for me, it's very self reported. So,
Okay.
what I do in the breakthrough world, when we're doing a breakthrough, somebody will come to me and say, here's where I am. It doesn't matter where they are, by the way. They could be super successful. I mean, I've literally had billion-dollar company CEOs come to me and go, yeah, but I'm only operating at like a 5 out of 10. So that's not their peak. It's self-reported. And so then from my model of reality, it's not a universal number. It's that we need to remove the barriers to this person's peak performance so that they can get themselves to their 8, 9, and 10. But it's self-reported. And so it's not a universal number, like you're operating at your peak if your income is this or your relationship status is that, but rather, if I ask you in the quiet of the night, how much of your potential do you think you're using? Everybody knows the answer to that question. And then the reason that my premise the whole time is that nothing's missing. You're just, maybe things are sitting on top of what is trying to be, emerge.
I like it. Tim, how do you think about measuring that, or what are the indicators or the signals that someone is in peak performance?
A couple of things that come to mind, Bruce. One is the old work by Csikszentmihalyi on flow. And so the ability to get into and stay in flow moments in which you are so enwrapped in the present moment, you're so engaged that you drop a lot of the ego and the kind of self-conscious awareness of your problems and all the, if you will, crap going around.
Yeah.
That's a very important indicator that you're, behaving at peak levels. If you can be in flow states a lot more. Now, there are ways to cultivate that capacity. Some of this is, for example, training the brain to pay better attention. So mindfulness meditation, for example, has been well documented to enhance prefrontal cortex function and reduce, in a way, the amygdala, which is that threat detector that's firing out these signals that you're under attack all day long and you better have your fight, flight, and freeze mode on. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other picture from my function as a longevity doctor is there are actually biomarkers that we can measure on a regular basis that predict whether you're doing well or not in your experience of aging and longevity. And, it's hard to be at peak performance when you are carrying a significant excess body fat percentage. If your VO2 max is low because you don't do any activity, if you are, showing a Dunedin pace of aging that is over 1, meaning every day that passes you age more than a day. These are all significant problems that we can now document and, moreover, make interventions to improve and then retest to show that you're actually getting better. So some of this is much more, if you will, scientific.
Yeah. I just want to follow up on that one specifically. I think one of the challenges I've always had with a lot of the kind of longevity philosophy is kind of this, okay, well, living a long life isn't necessarily the only measure of, a successful life or a good life. Like, how do you balance this idea of, living engaging, productive, life versus long life, and how does peak performance kind of fit into that?
Yeah, that is absolutely bang on. The whole concept is really more about health span, which is living longer with vitality and health and wellness. And then the big kind of elephant in the room in longevity is, well, what are you doing with all that extra time and vitality? If you have no purpose, or as a Japanese ikigai, if there's no reason to get up in the morning other than to golf another round, then, why bother? So a lot of this ultimately is about connection to oneself, others, the community, the planet, contributing to something larger than yourself, and fulfillment.
Yeah. Gina, I'm curious to kind of have you chime in on that one. When you work with folks, or you're looking at, a individual, an executive, a CEO who's looking to improve, how do you kind of help them become aware of kind of that quality of life aspect, not just kind of, okay, well, how much money are you making, or,
Exactly.
like what's your valuation, things like that.
It's exactly what Tim just kind of jumped off the diving board with, which is typically when I end up working with someone, they've already achieved what we would call material success. In fact, they're often someone else's end game, right? Like they have a big business or whatever. And now it's time to do these things for the sake of the deeper purpose. And that's what drives people past that amygdala alarm, right? Because it's bigger than them. It's bigger, like they have a purpose, usually global in nature, the people that I'm working with, because they've kind of succeeded in their environment, and now they want to make an impact globally. And so, what is sort of the big bucket situation is like, why me? And so then what we need to do is remove the barriers to that reality. And it's just a different set of, it's like a different set of programs, a different subset of information in the field that they need to sort of tap into. So we have to remove the limiting beliefs and the negative emotions and the conflicts that come from a previous era of programming. And it's not good or bad or right or wrong. Like in 1998, don't get me wrong, I was the most proud of my Microsoft Office 1998. Like it was the best. It was the best. The problem is, can you imagine now if I'd be like, Bruce, I only use Microsoft 98 because it was the best. And it's like, well, what are you talking about? It's 2025. So we're the same way. The programs that you created to deal with your life through the various phases, they were brilliant at the time. They're no longer appropriate. And to push through that, requires that purpose. You sort of crack through to the new set of programs and then live them into reality, managing the like people always talk about the amygdala like it's some big fancy thing. Like when I step on a stage to teach someone, the audience's amygdalas are like, what's happening here? Like, because this is new information. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I'm quite happy with my
stranger danger
program, right? So it's not just this big thing you have to overcome. It's habitual to recognize that we're programmed to predict, but that doesn't mean the prediction model that was created 25 years ago is any good now.
It's valid. Yeah. Tim, I'm curious, like what do you, when you're working with folks, you mentioned body fat or body mass, right? Kind of things. What else comes up as in terms of hindrances or things that are challenge or get in the way of people reaching peak performance, flow state? Like what are the other kind of things that you are looking at in terms of someone's situation or lifestyle or, current health conditions?
Right.
Like what's on your list?
Sadly, unless you happen to own a farm and you are aware of the provenance of the soils, most of us are stuck eating what big institutional agriculture is feeding us.
Yeah.
So one of my major concerns, and if you will, activisms, is around the food chain. Standard American diet, which is SAD, it's sad, it's sickening, addictive, death-defying. At the end of the day, for 50 years, we've gone seriously off track. It's been a public health disaster with the low-fat, no-fat movement. And now, the vast majority of North Americans eat pretty much nothing but carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So they have an addiction to sugar and high fructose corn syrup. And so we start in a very foundational way with nutrition. And I would just throw in that the cutting edge of this is personalized medicine. So we do a whole genomics analysis to say, you're in the, say, 70% of folks who have genetic variations that mean you can't really have carbohydrates in your diet because you're genetically not going to program to metabolize them properly.
Yeah.
You need to be keto. So when we get people keto, where they're basically burning fat for fuel instead of glucose, when they're on intermittent fasting, they are now jet fueled. And we also recommend, for example, ketone supplements you can take. This makes a huge difference in one's energy and then therefore your ability to get into these peak performance states and help others. Another big component that I alluded to is you can be eating a whole foods diet and think you're getting what you need, but both because there are genetic predispositions not to metabolize, absorb, and process, for example, vitamin D, you need supplements. And I'm not a fan, obviously, of multivitamins. They make no sense because if you're truly deficient in something, you need a lot more of it.
Yeah.
Many of my patients, I get on 10, 15,000 units of vitamin D a day, and the quote recommended daily allowance is 1,000.
Oh, 1,000, yeah.
That's like for probably a quarter or a third of the population, they're going to still be grossly deficient in D. And D isn't just a vitamin, it's a hormone. Every cell has a receptor. You got to have it optimized. And so at the end of the day, we really need to move forward to optimize folks' nutrition overall with vitamin and mineral supplementation on a consistent basis that's based on their own blood tests and genomics. So I would say, the foundation piece is this one, it's diet. Fitness, activity, clearly important, although a lot of what is coming out in longevity medicine is a U-shaped curve. And so some very recent, large, definitive prospective trial of exercise in Finland, Finnish twin study showed, being sedentary, bad news. But you don't want to be a triathlon or Iron woman or man because they also had shorter life expectancy. So moderation is the key.
Now, I'm curious, do they have shorter life expectancies because of their underlying kind of physiology, or because they were just put at risk? I mean, I was a triathlete for a while. It's dangerous. You're just exposing yourself to a lot more kind of life-threatening events. Oh,
there is that. I think there's pretty decent evidence that the really super athletes and even Olympians have suppressed immune systems. And immunosenescence, meaning your immune system is kind of dropping off a cliff, is a major driver of our aging and death. So we want to optimize immune function over time. So, sleep is the third big component. And, most of us, this whole, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of approach, well, you're going to be dead sooner if you don't get an adequate and really decent amount of sleep. And again, from the performance management piece, I'm a big fan of like an Aura Ring or some other sleep tracking device, because otherwise you don't know, are you getting enough deep, enough rapid eye movement sleep? And again, there are very specific things we can now do to optimize those pieces.
On that note, I was going to jump off of what he just said because he's talking immunosuppressant, and I'm immediately remembering. So one of the decks that I present somewhere has a slide in it that shows the immunosuppressant capacity of one burst of anger. I believe it's a HeartMath, a bit of research from HeartMath. And is it IgA, Tim? I'm talking a bit off the cuff here, but IgA is suppressed. So one burst of anger and your immune ability, your IgA, is suppressed for 8 hours. And so the HeartMath techniques that we teach in some of our trainings, or that I talk about in terms of resilience, and again, back to these negative emotions and limiting beliefs that are part of the breakthrough, is this idea that Tim's talking about things that everybody, vitamin D, food, and now let's get a little bit less tangible and go, oh, by the way, that anger that you're indulging in, right, that you're addicted to, I'm just going to use the words we've already been using, it's also suppressing your immune system. And if you don't self-regulate that, then it runs for 8 hours unchecked in a suppressive state. And that's just one emotion. And of course, a lot of these techniques that are regulatory of the self, so meditation, breathing, some of the techniques, snapping out of it, that is all a conscious awareness that while I might, make a bad reaction, it's within my control to pull it back to have a negligible effect, or at least mitigate the risk.
So I'm gonna go down a kind of related path here, which is thinking about stress, and I've kind of my kind of philosophy on stress is stress in moments of time in the right context for the right purpose can actually be quite helpful. Sustained periods of stress is where you have challenge. I'm not necessarily a fan of the whole we need to have zero stress.
That's crazy.
I think that's not actually kind of helpful. But we want to use stress strategically, and we want to focus on the right kind of stress to get us either motivated or into the right state that helps us with focus and with cognitive function. not the whole, like, I'm constantly stressed for, days and week at a time, which creates, chronic conditions. I'm kind of curious on your whole take and philosophies around stress. Tim, let's go to you.
So there is this concept that's quite fascinating, similar to the kind of U-shaped curve, called hormesis.
Okay.
And you may have heard of this term, and essentially it is what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And so the biohacking business is actually capitalizing on a lot of this. So cold exposure, heat exposure, electromagnetic fields. There are a lot of things that give us, if you will, a challenge and a stress. Starving the body, where you're actually in intermittent fasting. These things actually induce adaptations biologically that are beneficial and turn off some of the aging genes that we have turned on when we're under chronic angst, stress, if you will. So you're absolutely right, Bruce. There's a difference between healthy stressors that you control, you turn them on, and then you turn it off.
Yeah.
And it's the turning off piece that you practice. As hunter-gatherers, we would turn on our sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze when the tiger was chasing you. And when it stopped chasing you and you climbed the tree, 2 minutes later, everything was back to your homeostatic state.
Yeah.
The problem with us is we feel in our day-to-day urban lives that there's a tiger around every corner, and we're never turning that off. That is horrifically dangerous to our long-term health and wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. There was I think I was reading this or something somewhere around looking at hunter-gatherer societies, but on the hunter side, and the situation where you kind of run out of food and it takes you a couple of days to actually have a successful hunt. Well, the biological adaptations you go through on days 2, 3, and 4 of not eating actually help you hunt better. It actually helps, it helps with focus and perception and reduces a whole bunch of other sensations. Like, it actually, you can kind of see the evolutionarily kind of path here of, like, we've evolved to be actually quite good in certain activities in that starvation mode to help us, gather food. But so it's not necessarily always bad. It's just, it changes your kind of dynamics and what you can do and what you can't do. Gina,
go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly.
Go ahead, Tim.
The fascinating area of research on longevity is that virtually every animal model tested for the last 30 years, worms, fruit flies, mice, rats, primates, non-human and human, if you calorie restrict but don't starve, starvation is bad, but calorie restriction actually does induce these states of ketosis, and burning ketones is a way more efficient fuel source. So just as you say, if you were actually in a starvation mode and now you're in ketosis, that actually is a way better state for doing something and achieving peak performance. And so we don't have to, actually starve yourself. You can just do things like intermittent fasting and a keto diet where you're not scarfing back your average donut and bagel breakfast.
300 grams of carbohydrate a day. Gina, what do you notice that gets in people's ways, or things that you kind of identify and help people focus on that prevents them from getting into these peak performance states?
Well, just anxiety by far the number one. But before that, I want to kind of just touch on this idea of stressors, because Ilya Prigogine won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977, because he demonstrated that chaos wasn't inevitable. So when a system is under pressure, so in chemical terms, we would say entropy, heat, pressure, temperature, things like that. Everybody at the time was like, well, it's just going to explode. Like, it's going to be destroyed. It's going to go to chaos. And Prigogine demonstrated in the lab that there were certain structures that reorganized to highly complex structures. So think, rotting tree gook in the forest. And if you put those carbon atoms under the right temperature and the right pressure and extreme pressure, it turns to a diamond, and that structure, it can't be destroyed by anything other than a diamond. So that was a big study, because he extrapolated to human systems that we have this capacity. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Okay. Now, if we go to what Tim was saying, was the never turning off of the response, right? So I controversially, and I stand by my contrarian standpoint, that anxiety is the most useful emotion we have, but only if you recognize it right away.
Yeah.
So the moment you recognize anxiety, it means you are focused on what you do not want. And that is a gift. Letting it run for 3 weeks is disastrous.
Yeah.
So it is the most destructive emotion in the body because of all the things it does. But it's the most useful if you regulate it and you just, oh, this is anxiety. And then that's the number one thing I work with every single client. There hasn't been one yet that I haven't worked with this, which is it's fear of the future.
Yeah.
And unless you're telling me that you are dialed in and can predict it, right? In which case I would like the lottery numbers, then you're probably not very good at it. And all you're doing is holding yourself back in a reality that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the whole, learning how to drive a motorcycle. It's like they tell you that, don't look at the wall.
Right.
You look at the wall and that's where you're going to hit, right? You want to look at the open road, look at where you want to go, not what you're worried about hitting, right? And so the anxiety is just sitting there thinking about this horrible thing that I've happened to me, but you're just ruminating on this horrible thing rather than saying, okay, great. I don't want that. What do I want? Let's focus on that.
Yes. What do I want? There are 2 million bits of information, according to the computer scientists in 1954, available for selection. You get 126 bits a second. What are you picking? And just for those of you that did the quick math, 126 over 2 million is 0.006%. So you're not picking reality. You're picking a sliver of a sliver of a sliver. Why would you spend any of that budget on anything you didn't want?
Yeah. What else goes into this flow state, kind of the mechanisms or the things that need to be there for flow state? We talked a little bit about the physical side. We talked about a little bit of the mindset. Like, what else do you look at in terms of contributors or ways in which, I don't know if there's strategies or things that you can do to kind of increase the likelihood of getting the flow state or consistency or how long you stay on the flow state? What else comes up in this peak performance for you? I don't know, either one of you can take.
Gina, go ahead.
Okay. So here's what I would say. First of all, you have to want something, as we said, greater than where you're at. Then you have to actually produce the results. You have to get to point Z and have an experience where it worked. Then once you can confirm that you are doing doing what you say you're going to do, then you have to replicate it so it becomes habitual, right? That's how you build a new program. And so there's this idea that just doing it once is and that's a lot of coaching. And they did it. Well, so what? Right? Like my niece is a gymnast and she does 10,000 back handsprings on the beam, right? A back handspring on something that's less than an iPhone in width. Yeah. So that when she's under pressure in a competition, she doesn't need to think. Her body it habitually puts itself through that motion. So until you can't not do it that way, you're not doing it. And so you have to do it. And then you have to do it for, as Gladwell said, 10,000 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, how about you?
I agree. I think it's making time and space. The interesting aspect around neuroplasticity is that it can actually happen quite rapidly and dramatically. And perhaps you don't need to be meditating in a cave in Pakistan for 10,000 hours to become mindful and conscious and cultivate empathy, kindness, compassion, which is what we all want. Mm-hmm. Perhaps you can get there. So Dave Asprey, a good friend of mine, his last book was entitled Smarter, Not Harder. So are there ways we can get to these end states without having to do 10,000 hours of something? And certainly there are neurobiofeedback approaches. Mm-hmm. I would say psychedelics are very interesting because they seem to cut corners and get rapid neuroplastic changes in people. And I'm personally, and in my practice, exploring a lot of these avenues to help people get to those end states, training their brain to be able to pay attention in these ways in much more rapid approaches.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done quite a bit of work in psychedelics, and I certainly have found the whole set and setting, right, being super powerful, right? Like, and I think that's just generally in flow states too, or peak performance is, having the mindset, right? Is like just getting yourself tuned to want to be in those, or tuning your kind of thinking pattern or your focus in the right ways, and then getting the right context and environment, right? Like distractions, music. Like I've gotten certain patterns. I know certain types of music will help it a lot better. Other types of music won't. Right? Learning how to turn certain things off, put things in other rooms so they're not distracting. Like really kind of thinking about the context, the environment that you're operating within has a huge impact on your ability to get into these flows.
But also, you just touched on something super important, which is like letting go of in my world, the negative emotions and those limiting beliefs that are habitually
absolutely
keeping you stuck in wherever you're stuck. And I just want to say a word here because, we hear peak performance. I hear Tim going, it's going to be faster and, faster and with less effort and hacking and, yeah. But I want to remind people that it's not nothing. Like everybody wants to be a butterfly. And, if you're a caterpillar, you want to be a butterfly, but no one's talking about what it feels like to go through that goo phase, right? Like it is uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
So, and so what I say to people, and I want to kind of say this to everybody watching, if you're uncomfortable, that's a good thing because it means you're actually outside of your comfort zone. I'll be working with someone, they'll go, geez, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm like, you came here because you wanted to get out of your comfort zone. The definition of that boundary is discomfort. So it's uncomfortable. And the more, and what here, I will say this, and I just want to say Tim's a genius, by the way, in case that hasn't been said yet, because I've worked with him a bit. And you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Yeah. And what I found is the people that I work with that habitually train themselves to be uncomfortable. So not to be uncomfortable for the sake of discomfort,
exactly,
but to be uncomfortable for the sake of learning how to combat, be resilient, adapt in the face of that adversity. That's the common thread of every single person I work with. So they put themselves in controlled environments, if you will, climbing mountains, doing this, doing that, whatever. Then they take those tools back to reality. And I think it was Wim Hof said something along the lines of, you go to the cold instead of waiting for the cold to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's building a bank of resilience, which makes it rapid, but it's not effortless and it's not without its discomfort. And we're not all just like laughing at everybody who's struggling, but we're purposefully struggling with a purpose, I think is the key.
Yeah. We're gonna hit time here. I want to make sure that everyone knows how to get a hold of folks. Tim, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, what's the best way to get you?
So the clinic website, vivagenlifesciences.com. My personal email, I'm happy to have and respond to anybody who's interested in this stuff. Dr. Tim Cook, DRTIMCOOK @gmail.com.
Awesome. And Gina, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, we're on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me. Because we do check it. It's the one thing we check. But in the vein of what Tim is saying, it's Gina@greatnessgroup.com. Anybody who wants to engage with this is my passion as it is yours and Tim's, and I will answer any questions in that respect.
Perfect. And if people want to get a hold of me, Bruce@eckfeldt.com is the easiest. Obviously on LinkedIn as well. Eckfeldt.com is my website. Tim, Gina, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That was really fun. Thank you.
Very welcome.